The Winnipeg Jets have aced every single exam to start the year that you could possibly ask for. But now the questions are about to get even harder as the Jets hit the road for one of the longest away stretches of the season. Can the Jets pull through and come away with huge victories? Let's chat about that on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode, obviously, we're going to be talking about the upcoming Jets road trip, and it starts in New York this evening. Going to be a really tough game, but this just seems to really be the first of many very challenging tests. Now, what's interesting about the Jets is when you look at the underlying metrics for this team, Winnipeg actually plays really well on the road, better than they do at home, which is really funny. Recently, the Jets' home form, the past couple of games has been very good, but once they hit the road, it's like a totally different team. And maybe it's because they overthink some matchups. Maybe they try to hard match with the control at home a little too often, and instead should just trust their guys to do what they're best at, which now that we're on the road for almost the whole month, might actually be to Winnipeg's benefit. So we're going to start off with some thoughts on this New York team, which has been a very interesting squad, maybe not one that is performing as well as I think some folks would expect, but still fourth in the Metro, which is becoming a very competitive division. But before we dive into this first matchup on this huge road swing, just wanted to let you know that tonight's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if that bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Now, like I said, when we're talking about tough teams the Jets are about to face, the entire road trip for this first half is basically all through the Eastern Conference. And it's not just any teams in the Eastern Conference. Winnipeg is going to face many of the top-ranked squads, the Panthers twice, the Rangers, and a handful of others. But starting off with the Rangers, I think presents one of the most interesting matchups. It's a familiar team for a lot of reasons. I always call the Rangers Winnipeg East, if you will. This is a team that actually feels like it's relatively similar in composition. You can argue that they don't have an elite number 1C, but they do have one of the best goalies in the world. They've got some elite defensemen. Obviously in some areas they are deeper than the Jets are, but what I think is very interesting is that, they're a team that's pretty decent at 5v5, and they have typically they have a ridiculous power play. This year, it's not first in the league, but in previous seasons, it's been up there, right? With the Jets having the best power play, I guess you can say Winnipeg answers back with some of their own real scary stuff. The Jets' offense, with the man advantage is just automatic, right? And that's kind of how the Rangers' power play has been in years past. This year, I look at these lines and I'm finding it to be a very interesting team. Up front, you've got Panarin, Zibanejad, and Lafreniere. Then you've got Kreider, Trocheck, and Smith, followed by Cooley, Hedl, and Kakko. And on your fourth line, Edstrom, Carrick, and Vesey. Now, what I would say about this team is that when you think about how this aligns to the Jets' top nine, I actually think that there's a lot of symmetry. If you maybe swap Panarin and Lafreniere with Kreider and Smith in those kind of spots, you almost have what I would call a really 1-to-1-ish sort of alignment with the Jets. Lafreniere and Panarin could maybe sub for Ehlers and Perfetti, and Zibanejad is kind of the answer to Scheifele. And so in a lot of ways, this team is, especially with the top six, not that dissimilar to what the Jets are doing. Where, the Jets and Rangers also have some unique traits is that their third lines are actually kind of closet second lines. This Hedl unit has been really good for New York. Hedl is always very underrated. And now that he's finally staying healthy, he's actually starting to put up some big numbers. Kako, everyone's still trying to figure out what he does. He remains the enigmatic player ever, as he is. But this Rangers team, their top 9, if you really kind of squint, it does kind of feel like a very similar Winnipeg-y mixture of some good top young talent, along with some maybe not like franchise level veterans, but generally really good to excellent. Now, the one exception is Panarin. Panarin is just a different kind of animal. Keeping him off the scoreboard is going to be very difficult. He is by far their best player. Lafreniere is kind of getting there, but when you look at the score sheet this year, when you look at what Panarin has done for this team, it's pretty fair to say that among their skaters, he is still number 1, and it's probably by a pretty fair margin. Maybe Lafreniere at some point, will become a player of this caliber. That'd be asking a lot because Panarin really is at times, at his absolute best, maybe a top 10 player in the league. He's that prolific. He's that consistent. And he just seems to not really slow down. So I'm anticipating this being a very challenging matchup. The Lowry line's going to have its hands absolutely full. If that line can maybe soften some of the matchups for the rest of Winnipeg's top 9, that would be great. But I'm expecting this to be a bit of a dogfight. On defense, it doesn't get easier for Winnipeg necessarily. You've got Lindgren and Fox, Miller and Trouba, and Jones and Schneider. Now, I would say that there's only a couple of guys on this unit that particularly worry me, but those guys also happen to be really freaking good. Fox is, just crazy. He's the closest answer to Morrissey that the Rangers have. And in years past, I would say that Fox has been even better. This year, he's certainly better than Morrissey is this season. Although I think with Josh, it might just be the pairing more than anything. Miller, also really good. And when he plays with Fox, they tend to do really well. I guess if there's some level of comfort for the Jets, it's that, once you get past Miller and Fox, the matchups start to get, considerably easier. This team defensively is not as tight as it was to start the season. And with the Jets facing up against Jonathan Quick, this will be a really interesting game. I think it's going to be, every time we play the Rangers, it always feels like it's a very close scoreline. I really don't see any reason to go away from that. This is a tough test. Now, I will say the Rangers, the past several games have been a little bit topsy-turvy. They've had some solid wins against teams like the Islanders and the Wings and the Sens, but then you also realize that they've lost to the Sabres and the Caps and Panthers. And in some cases, they've lost by a lot. So, they've been a little leaky on the back end, and the teams that they're beating up on are teams that you would think a Rangers team that has cup aspirations would beat on. And this is the same thing that I kind of say about the Jets, where it's great if you face softer matchups, but no one's going to give you all the credit in the world for doing that. You've got to take care of business and show up against the big teams when they come around. And so far, the Jets have really done that this year. Going to be very interesting to see how they do against this Rangers team, where, New York is a little top heavy. Their top players, they've got 4 guys who have double-digit points so far, whereas the Jets have 10. Now, in New York's defense, they've got 3 or 4 guys who are kind of hovering around 10 points. But for the Jets, they've already hit that. And you look at Winnipeg scoring, and it's very distributed all up and down the lineup. So Winnipeg really does feel like a team that's primed and built in the right way to be consistently successful. So we'll have to see how long the Jets can keep this up. But tell you what, I'm going to go with a score prediction. Love to see yours. I will say 4-3 Jets. I think it's going to be a close one. But if Winnipeg can maybe get a power play or two, that might be the way to get past Quick. He has been announced to be starting unless that has changed. But I'm assuming Shesty is going to get the night off. Because Quick, the past couple of games, he's put up pretty crazy numbers. But when you're not really your backup, I guess, but when your other starter, your main starter happens to have a 920, yeah, I think you probably could be doing a lot worse when your backup has eaten up a couple of extra starts here and there, and he's put up like a 960 something. So what a great goaltending duo, maybe the one that could arguably challenge the Jets for best in the league. And so we'll get to see if we can maybe shrink Quick's performances by a few save percentage points. But of course, this is really just the first of a huge road swing, and I'm kind of cursing the schedule makers for this because for some reason, the NHL decided the Jets would have like one home game for the rest of November, which is just kind of annoying. And they put it right in the middle, and it just is like, why would you do that? I guess maybe they want to torture us. I don't know. But either way, this is going to be a phenomenal test of what Winnipeg is really made of. And it's not like the Jets haven't faced huge tests already and aced them with flying colors. They've even beaten the Lightning already, and that's going to be one of their harder opponents on this trip. They've beaten the Pens as well. So in all respects, I think the Jets are primed for a big run. But all that said, you really can't take any of these games for granted. And we'll talk about which ones could pose the biggest challenge and maybe the biggest, I guess, test for Winnipeg over the next couple of weeks. But before we dive into all of that, did want to shout out our friends and partners at SelectQuote. The World Series, the Super Bowl, the Olympics. The world's top athletes get to play in these top-level sporting events thanks to one thing: teamwork. And teamwork can also protect your financial legacy and your family's future. SelectQuote's licensed insurance agents are the perfect teammates when shopping for customized, affordable life insurance. They can help you find the right policy to keep your financial legacy safe in your family's end zone. You invest so much time to take care of yourself and to be the healthiest, best version of yourself, and SelectQuote's exclusive policies can reward that effort. Other life insurance brokers offer impersonal, one-size-fits-all policies that may cost you more and cover you less, while SelectQuote's licensed insurance agents work for you to tailor a life insurance policy for your individual needs in as little as 15 minutes. These policies are also more affordable than you think. You could get coverage up to $1 million for as little as $20 per month. Head to SelectQuote.com right now, and a licensed insurance agent will call you with the right policy for your life and your budget. Get the right life insurance for you for less at SelectQuote.com/LockedOnNHL. Go to SelectQuote.com/LockedOnNHL today to get started. That's SelectQuote.com/LockedOnNHL. SelectQuote. They shop, you save. Also wanted to shout out our friends and partners at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if that bet wins. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you're placing your bets. If you're watching, the Ravens this year, or maybe you're a Bengals fan, maybe you're out looking at the Vikings, which I think a lot of you from Manitoba tend to watch. Been an interesting year for the Vikes. Obviously, in years past, you hadn't really had a lot of hope, but the Vikings defense seems to be putting up some pretty impressive results. Sam Darnold, maybe a little questionable, but hey, you know what? Compared to what the Vikes have put up in years past, especially the last few seasons in the post-Cousins era, this could be probably more than you'd expect, right? So big year, potentially a deeper playoff run. And if you're thinking about maybe getting on the action, it's best if you go to FanDuel.com right now. You can join today. And again, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. And if you're betting on the Vikes, that's probably a pretty safe bet to get the bonus. That's all at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Everydayers, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we're chatting a little bit about what should be a very challenging road trip for the Jets. Like I just said, I'm really not happy with the schedule makers having put Winnipeg in a tougher spot. This is like a long road trip with very few breaks at home, which is just kind of like, why? Why would you do this? And what makes this especially annoying is that most of the teams the Jets are going to be playing on the road are going to be bare minimum 500. Almost all of them are above 500. This is like a pretty difficult schedule. And it starts, of course, with the Rangers, who are fourth in the Metro, but like fourth and first are only separated by 3 points. For all intents and purposes, I'd actually argue that the Rangers are basically right there with Carolina, who's actually in action right now. And if that scoreline holds, which it absolutely should, they will move into a tie for first place. And the Rangers will be 3 points back of them with the game in hand. So the top of the Metro right now is very competitive. And that's just, the first of many such stops. Then, Winnipeg has to go to Tampa Bay, which is a tough team. But we've already beaten the Lightning. I do wonder if they're going to be a little more, I would say, irritated after the last game. Dumping 6 or 7 goals against the Lightning is certainly something that's going to get them riled up. I don't think that they're going to be thrilled with that performance, and we'll have to see if Braden Point's going to be ready to go. He is a huge difference maker for this offense that doesn't have some of the craziest depth at the moment. Then, the really big test, probably the best team the Jets have faced so far, it's going to be the Panthers. Winnipeg gets a home and home against Florida, and, we get to see our old friend Paul Maurice. And the Panthers are just, I think in my mind, a model of excellence out east. And it's funny because in previous years, they were good, but they never really seemed to be that threatening. And then, of course, they go on, this magical Stanley Cup run. They beat the Oilers. And it seems like this year they're not really slowing down. They have conceded a decent chunk of goals, but nothing that I think would be particularly worrying. What I think is more notable for them is that their offense continues to hum. Sam Reinhart, man, he is that dude. I thought, he would slow down, but he's already at like double-digit goals this year. And, he's not really far behind with guys like Sam Bennett, Anton Lundell, Verhaeghe, Barkov, you name it. This team is just loaded for bear. So long as Barkov stays healthy, obviously his injuries have been a little bit of a concern to start the year, but overall, this team is pretty dangerous, and it wouldn't shock me if they have another deep playoff run. Hopefully not a cup win, because it would be nice if the Jets won at this time. Paul Maurice even said he hopes the Jets get the next one, so I'll take his word for it. But if you really want to get a vibe check for what this Jets team is going to be like, I feel like these two games, this coming Saturday and on the following Tuesday, could be really big indicators, right? And it's not like I worry if the Jets lose any of these games. Winnipeg has already built itself up such a beautiful margin that you don't really stress about dropping a couple of results. I just think, it'd be amazing if they can continue to pad their historical run. Put it out of reach of all of the other teams permanently. The fact that it's been almost 15 years since the last team did this, it's unlikely that anyone's going to really get close to what Winnipeg has started with this year. So, adding a few extra victories certainly wouldn't be too bad. But in terms of, the second half of the trip, this is where you start to see some of those Western teams and Central Division opponents, plus a couple of teams we haven't really faced yet. We're going to face, of course, the Penguins, who we've beaten. And then we get to see the Preds, which, Nashville this year, not good. They just lost in overtime to Colorado, and all of those big fancy investments they made have not really paid off. In fact, in overtime tonight, Brady Shea actually ended up falling, and that was what kind of decided the game in overtime. So, I thought that for all of their signings, it raised the floor. It doesn't really seem to have actually done that. If anything, the Preds are really scraping the bottom of the barrel, and it just seems like, their start to the year has been about as dreadful as it gets. And if it continues, Barry Trotz won't be afraid to tear it down. But, I don't know how you really do that with all those free agents you just signed. The whole point of a rebuild is that you give yourself some space to take on some dead salary, you get some picks and stuff. And I don't know that the Preds have, loads of cap space to work with now. So, very interesting team. And if Burnett gets fired, I'd be curious to know if he ends up somewhere else. But then, after the Preds, Winnipeg then gets to face Minnesota. Minnesota's the only other really strong team in the Central right now. I think the Avs at some point will get there, but they have to actually get healthy enough to be particularly worrying. The Wild, though, they've had a strong start. They've looked the part. They're an annoying team. Every time we play Minnesota, it's a very physical affair. Lots of people usually end up with a few extra bumps and bruises. And, the last game was close. It was a 2-1 victory. And so wouldn't be shocked if this is another one that has very narrow margins. Wasn't as rough the last game. I didn't really see as many fisticuffs or players taking cheap shots, but we all know that at any point, Winnipeg, Minnesota can turn into an absolute bloodbath because it just seems to be that way. And it's usually over something really stupid or incidental. So let's just hope the boys keep their cool and don't do anything reckless. After that, we start to see a couple of Pacific teams. You get the Kings and the Knights. The Kings are good. I think that they're a manageable team. They're beatable. I'm not worried about that one. I'd be more concerned about the Knights game. I know Vegas is getting dumped on by, Carolina right now, but Vegas is probably one of the few teams in the West that I think is going to put the Jets under a lot of pressure. This team plays that fast style that always gives Winnipeg fits, and so far the Jets have been better about handling it, but I think the Avs game probably showed that the Jets are still working on that part. And so it'll be interesting to see how Winnipeg does against Vegas, especially in Vegas. It's very hard to beat the Knights on the road or, in their own rink. Right now, the Carolina Canes are doing it, but Carolina is also one of the top scoring, top offensive teams in the league right now. So, assuming that is the script that holds, the Jets should also get a win there because Winnipeg is also the top offense in the league. But hey, stranger things happen. Maybe it ends up being a really close affair, and we somehow get all of that stress and pain from the last time that we saw Vegas in a really difficult spot. So, Mark Stone may have to sit that one out. We'll see. He's been day-to-day or something for the past couple of games. This is at the end of the month, but we all know that Stone misses a lot of time. So something to keep an eye on. Then closing it out for, not really closing it out, but I guess closing out the road trip at least, we finally face the Stars again. This one is going to be a fun game. I think Dallas is going to be much better than they showed in the past game. I know the Stars have had a rockier start, but the team that just sort of butchered the Penguins 6-1, I think is probably a better indicator of 7-1. I think that team is probably more of what we should expect in this game. Dallas will be on home ice. They'll have that advantage, and the Jets are going to need to put on their best game face because the Stars are going to be looking for some payback after we, frankly, made them look uncompetitive. That's how good the Jets were in their first matchup. So Dallas, I'm sure, will be looking to make some hay and fire back. But after that, the Jets are going to start having more and more home games, which is nice. They do seem to alternate a lot of road games in between, which is, kind of silly and sort of stupid. Very weird second half of this start to the year, all the way through, New Year's. But I guess I really can't complain. The Jets have basically answered every question thrown at them so far. So let's just hope that they keep doing it. I mean, there's all the evidence in the world that this team is more than ready for it. And I can't really help but be impressed with how they've answered every challenge, how they continue to fight for each other. And the results on the ice, I think, really speak for themselves. So here's to a really successful road trip. Let's hope the Jets come away with some big wins. Now, amidst all of this, there's one interesting storyline that I think some folks have kind of hinted at, maybe they've talked about. I see it sometimes in Discord or Twitter, whatever social media I'm using, and it's about Rasmus Kupari, and I think he presents one of the very interesting questions. Is Kupari fixed, and what has maybe changed for him? We'll chat about that in particular in just a quick moment, but before we go any further, thought it'd be worth shouting out our friends and partners at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million subscribers and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to everyone. You just pick more or less than at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. When I'm thinking about players that I might choose for a pick, in this upcoming game against the Rangers, I would say if you're thinking about maybe individual scoring, Morrissey, 1.5 points or more, I think more is probably a pretty safe bet. Maybe the same for Kyle Connor. I think that's a pretty safe one. I think throughout this entire road trip, Morrissey, Connor, and Scheifele are very safe bets for over 1.5 to maybe 2 points. They've just continued to click. And you know what? If you get 4 of these picks right, as few as 4, you could win 100 times your money. And if you're wondering why PrizePicks is the best way to do this, PrizePicks wants to make sure that all of your withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. You can get your winnings in as little as 15 minutes, and they even offer Venmo for withdrawals and deposits, so it's always super convenient, and it even comes back with their injury insurance. If somebody gets hurt in the middle of your lineup, no problem, your picks will still stay alive, so you have a chance to come away with some big victories. It's obviously a great time to get in on the action with the start of the season really underway. And the best way to do that is to download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we're just wrapping up with an interesting question about Rasmus Kupari. He did score a very nice goal the other night against the Dallas Stars, although we had some help with that one. It was a bit of a mistake for Matt Dumba, and he kind of got cooked. Now, Kupari, I think, has been one of the stranger players to talk about because my feeling about Kupari is that he's a decent fourth liner, and that's kind of it. The thing with him that I think has always stood out is that in years past, Kupari struggled with decision making. There were times when he'd have, some good outlets, and when he got pressured, he just fired the puck blindly into an opposing skater and gave up a very dangerous chance. Now, thankfully for him, he's got Hellebuck or some other great goalies backing him up for the Winnipeg. So, in his case, he probably doesn't have to worry about that so much. But all the same, I think that there's been some question about, whether Kupari is actually fixed. And I think, Arniel has kind of recognized that Kupari's game is very straightforward. What you ask of him is to be a bit of an offensive zone wrecking ball for about 10 minutes a night, right? A forechecking menace, a guy who uses his skill and speed to get up and down the ice very quickly and to attack the corners, to limit that space, and just be a real nuisance. And I think Kupari has done that very well. He's also started to find himself in some really dangerous shooting areas. Hasn't really connected for him more than twice this year. And one of them, I don't know if I would really class it as the kind of finish I was talking about. He just made some, really nice plays in conjunction with, it might have been Appleton or Lowry or something. I forget who got the assist for that. But, all that said, Kupari, I think, has just been nice as a fourth line center. I don't know that I would ask him to do more than that, but he is showing a good usage of his tools. I don't think it necessarily translates into a guy who you would ask him to be the 2C necessarily. But as a speedster, if you're looking for a guy who can be just a solid, fourth line center who can eat some minutes, who can be fast, and who can occasionally generate some breakaways because of his edge work, Kupari is that kind of guy. I think if he adds a little more finishing touch and maybe makes a couple of better shot selections, he might actually start to put away a few shots. But it's not like they're actually bad that he's taking them. Most of his attempts, I think, have been pretty good. It's just that maybe the goalies saved a few extra. Maybe the release wasn't as strong as he wanted it to be. So I'm not really worried about it. I would say, though, I think Arniel's done a good job of not asking more of him than is necessary, right? And it seems like Scott has kind of found this balance with his team of recognizing where guys are strong, where you kind of have to manage the room, and how you make all of that sort of gel. And there are times where he'll have to sit a player down for a shift or two and kind of send a message to guys who don't usually get that done to them. I think of the first line that, quite frankly, hasn't been good in years past. And once they got benched, they would have some really big answer shifts. And in, the following games, it seemed like there was a spark really lit inside of all of them. So I think Arniel has done a good job. I think he looks at a player like Kupari, sees him as a really solid role player, doesn't ask him to do anything that's too crazy. Let him, naturally create some good offense, really just grind down opponents in the offensive zone. And that's all he's really looking for. Strong effort shifts, energy line stuff. I think that's really what he's kind of asked of Kupari, and Kupari has answered. And if that's all that Rasmus does, I don't really mind that. I wouldn't mind seeing a little bit of David Gustafsson too spliced in there. I think both he and Gus can kind of anchor that role effectively, and maybe Gus even offers a little more physicality. But if Kupari also keeps this role, there's really no downside. They've both been really solid in that respect. The fourth line in general just seems to be clicking along. The only thing that they don't do is score. They don't really record a load of points, and that's where, once the trade deadline rolls around, maybe the Moose season is starting to look a little out of reach. You might think about maybe trying, Chibrikov on the fourth or something. Chibrikov has a nasty little release, and maybe that extra bit of finishing touch could be what the bottom six could use in a little, not necessarily abundance, but an extra shot that's got a nice, goal ping, right? He's got an absolutely ridiculous shot, and I think at times it's a little underrated. So, if Kupari can maybe get some goal scoring help out on the wings, really can't go wrong there, because he's certainly doing all of the hard work to get into those dangerous areas to begin with. But so far, so good for the Jets. Kupari seems to be one of many players enjoying a resurgence. We'll keep an eye out for who else seems to be doing really well, and maybe some guys who could use a little bit of time off or some help every now and then over the next couple of weeks. And we'll talk about which players are standing up or standing out in both respects. But for tonight's episode, that is going to be all the time that we have. I thank you so much for listening and making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. We'll see you here tomorrow with coverage of Winnipeg versus New York. Cross your fingers for a big win. And again, give me your score predictions below or at my social medias at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. For tonight's episode, though, that's going to be all the time that we have. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great night. And as always, go Jets go.